What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Somebody's Weezer is Drowning My Jukebox. I am your host, Andy Smith, and this is the series where we go through and rank every single album in Weezer's discography from worst to best. We are cracking the top 5 in this episode with 5, 4, and 3 on their albums. I'm so excited. There's some really good stuff here, so let's get right into it. First up, at number 5, this is probably a pretty hot take, but we have Pacific Daydream, which was released in 2017. Pacific Daydream is the rare case of Weezer experimenting and it worked. It blends this kind of beach, sun-dried pop with rock and all these other elements, and it just works for some reason. There are a lot of good songs in this record. I know a lot of people don't necessarily like Pacific Daydream because it's not their earlier stuff, but I love this album. Mexican Fender is a great starting track. It just kicks off the album right away with this hard guitar riff that just goes on and on and on. It's just so good, and the hook on that song is just so great. Happy Hour is great too. It's a bit more poppy feeling, but it's fun, it's breezy, it's quick. And my two personal favorites in this album, La Mancha Screwjob, which is really weird, but it works. It's very poppy as well, but it just works for me for whatever reason. And the final track, Any Friend of Diane's, it's a good song. Like, this is legitimately one of my favorite just songs in general. I have it in other playlists that aren't just Weezer dedicated. Nice acoustic guitar all the way through, a good hook, some good lyrics, some catchy lyrics, It's just a good song, and it ends the album really well. As far as the other songs, Beach Boys is okay. Feels Like Summer, which was the lead single off this album, a little too poppy to be Weezer. I feel like this shouldn't have been the lead single off this album, because it really does give the wrong impression of what Pacific Daydream is, because Feels Like Summer is super poppy, it's super beachy, super electronic feeling. There's not much rock to it, and that kind of gives the wrong impression for Pacific Daydream and for Weezer. And I feel like that's kind of what turned a lot of people off from this album, was when they heard Feels Like Summer. There's not any terribly bad songs in this album. There's a lot of great songs, and it's just this weird mix of pop and rock and beachy vibes with all these different cool lyrics. Rivers Cuomo talks a lot about what it's like, living in California, which we'll hear more later. We heard a lot in the Black album. Pacific Daydream definitely strikes a balance between the Black album, which is too sonically and lyrically out there, and the White album, which I'll cover later, which is really hammering home those beachy, sun-dried California vibes. If it weren't for the fact that it kind of just gets a little too poppy and a little just feeling redundant from all the sounds you hear, it probably would be higher on this list. But number 5 still isn't bad, 5 out of 14. So I love this album. Give it a listen. At number 4, we have the quintessential Weezer album. I feel this is the album that everyone, since its release in 1996, put Weezer in the boundaries that this album set. And this album, of course, is Pinkerton. This is Weezer's second album, and at the time of its release, it didn't really critically do that well. It sort of flopped. It was like a sophomore slump type of deal. But as time went on, it basically became the album for a whole generation. And musically, this is Weezer almost at their best. There isn't a bad song musically on here. They really nail that grimy, gritty, cheap-sounding garage rock with their guitars and drums. Patrick Wilson, the drummer, goes crazy on this track. Just absolutely crazy. The reason why this album is number 4 is because of the lyrics. It's creepy, and Pinkerton is the pinnacle of the creepiness and the pervertedness. There are some great songs here that aren't as creepy. El Scorcho's fantastic. It's one of my favorite Weezer songs. I know I say that all the time, but this one legitimately is great. The Good Life is great. Tired of Sex, while it is kind of lyrically, it starts the album off with a huge bang. and it's just, the guitar in that song is, it's crisp, it's crisp. Pink Triangle's good too. It talks about Rivers' relationship with a girl that he likes, but who ends up being a lesbian. The final track, Butterfly, is a soft acoustic little song that tapers out the album based off of a play that Rivers saw. Rivers Cuomo spared no expense in being as deep and dark and personal as possible in his songwriting, and that's kind of why it started off as a critical failure. Everyone didn't like that Rivers Cuomo was basically opening up his closet, essentially, for all the skeletons to come out. People didn't like that. It made them uncomfortable. I don't know. I love Pinkerton. It's a nice jam. Just don't listen to it too hard. You'll be fine. Just don't think too hard about the lyrics and you'll be good. It can just be really creepy at times. And I think this album probably wouldn't be made today, which you could argue whether or not that's a good thing or not. Coming in at number 3, we have the White Album, released in 2016. So I became a fan of Weezer after Everything Will Be Alright in the End came out in 2014. So I was around and knew about Weezer and was really into Weezer during the whole release of the White Album. I was there for the hype, the singles, the cover art being announced. I was there for everything, and it was awesome. I mentioned that Pacific Daydream is sort of a blend between the Black Album and the White Album. Well, the White Album has this sound that focuses really heavily on those beachy vibes, but instead of going in the pop direction, they stay sort of in the classic Weezer punk rock, pop rock direction. And there's some songs that are very reminiscent of Maladroit, I feel, very reminiscent of Pinkerton, very reminiscent of the Blue Album, which is great. You'll love to hear it. But there's still room for Weezer to kind of venture off into some other landscapes and some songs. California Kids, great starting track. It's very reminiscent of My Name is Jonas, I feel like, in terms of how it starts off the album. It starts off with this kind of big bang, and you get a feeling for how the album's going to feel right away when you hear the beach and the seagulls and the kids playing on the beach. You know right away this is going to be a very sunny feeling album. This is going to be a very relaxed and breezy and chill album, and it is. Some other standout tracks I like from this. Thank God for Girls. Rivers Cuomo shows off his quote-unquote rapping skills. It's a very weird song, even weirder music video, but it works. I really enjoy it. It is more along the poppy side, but it still has some really good rock elements. After Rivers spits his verse, it explodes into this cascade of electric guitars and drums for the chorus, and it just works really well. Do You Want to Get High is very Pinkerton-esque. It's very reminiscent of the Pinkerton sound, lyrically as well. I love it. It's very gritty sounding, very loose feeling, but it's still held really well together. King of the World has one of the catchiest hooks of all Weezer songs. It's great. The guitar is great. I love that song. LA Girls is a nice beachy ballad. It just works really well. It's one of my favorite songs on this album. I think I teared up when I first heard it. If that tells you anything about me. Jacked Up is weirdly excellent. It's very poppy feeling with this piercing keyboard going through and Rivers Cuomo reaching vocal inflections that you don't really hear too often from him, but it works. Endless Bummer is a perfect track to end this kind of album. It starts off as this bonfire, acoustic little guitar feel, and then it just explodes into all these electric guitars, ripping off solos and riffs, and it ends perfectly, and then it tapers off and you hear the beach again, and it really solidifies this vibe of this is a album you would listen to on the beach. This is an album you would listen to when you're on the West Coast, when you're in Los Angeles, and they really nailed it here by getting those vibes right. And I think this is a great album, and it definitely is, without a doubt, number 3 for me. Didn't have to think too hard about this one. So there you have it. That's episode 4 of Somebody's Weezer is Drowning My Jukebox. Got the top 5 done. We got 4, 5, and 3. We got 5, 4, and 3 done. Next up, we have the final 2. I'll be spending a lot of time on these 2 albums because they mean so much to me, and they're just awesome albums. I'm so excited to talk about them. But until then, I will see you guys next time.